Hello, everyone. Taking a few minutes this evening to kind of help you out with the historical colonial Williamsburg journaling project. We're working toward getting final drafts done by the end of the week. So what I thought I'd do, I'll create a video here just to kind of give you some tips for at home, and then we are going into the computer lab Wednesday in order to spend some time again online if there's any final information you're looking for to give your historical fiction a sense of realism. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to shoot several videos, and I will put a marker down on YouTube on the description part. So if there's a part you don't want to watch, you just want to work on a certain part, you can just skip ahead to the parts you want, and I'll make sure to label what's covered. I'm going to start with just a general description again of what the project is and our reasoning for doing it. We recently finished Chapter 9, and just as kind of a short project in between two, we're going to be using information we got from Chapter 9 on colonial Williamsburg to create a historical fiction or a journal about life in Williamsburg. It's given the kids a chance to use, or it's given you guys a chance to use some of the information we learned. Some quick review of some of the requirements for the project. Your journal has to cover a time frame of 2 to 3 days in Williamsburg, starting on a Sunday. And during that time period, your character who you're creating, you're writing it from their point of view, so it's first person as a diary or journal. Your person is going to go to church on Sunday, so you can talk about that, and if you need to, you can go back into Chapter 9 and the Brewton Parish Church, and it talks about many of the things that would happen at the church on Sunday, and that is all material you can use in telling your story. Your character then has to have a problem. It can't be a big one. It can't be something that's going to take days and weeks and months to solve, because you only have 2 to 3 days to solve the problem. So it needs to be a more minor problem for your character. One example, I was talking with one of the kids here the other day about dame school as a student there, that their person might not be getting along with someone, or there's a lesson they're struggling with and they're going to practice their way through it, and at the end of your 2 to 3 days hopefully succeed, because we all want our characters to succeed. In the meantime, though, you're supposed to be rolling in details from that time period. So you can talk about games that we used in Chapter 9. So you can talk about different games your character might play on Sunday afternoon. We talked about the studies that students at William and Mary or Dame School would have to do, and you can include those studies in your story as things your character would have been doing on Monday or Tuesday. If you're doing a trade as an apprentice, the history.org website does a tremendous job, and we've already been there once. We'll be going there again tomorrow. But the history.org website does a beautiful job talking about the different trades you had to choose from. So there's no excuse not to have the tools of the trade included in your story, or facts or information about that trade built into your story. That historical part has to be there. So if it's not there, yeah, that will affect whether your score as far as did you include historical information to make the story seem more realistic. Quick reminder, a historical fiction is a story that can take a character that didn't exist during that time and put them into that time period, but you're doing it in a realistic way. So the example I gave the class was, I can put a character on the Titanic that wasn't originally on the Titanic, but that character can't do modern things. They have to live as if it were that time period. And in the end, the Titanic has to sink, because that historically is correct. Your character is living in colonial Williamsburg, and so they're going to go about their life like a person would have from historical colonial Williamsburg would have. You're going to run into characters from history like Patrick Henry, Martha Washington, possibly Thomas Jefferson. You might run into Richard Henry Lee. There's a lot of different characters that you could run into while you're shopping or working in your trade shop or visits the school during your time in Williamsburg. Or option two, because I wanted to open it up, if you want to talk about a character that wouldn't have been there and what they're doing during that time, you can talk about George Washington. You can talk about Thomas Jefferson if he's off in Philadelphia. We know during this time period what these characters are doing. Washington's off preparing to fight the war. Thomas Jefferson's writing the Declaration of Independence. So there are things you can bring up in your story to make it more realistic. Okay, so solving a problem, number one. Number two, you either have to bump into, and church is a great place, by the way, for this, bump into a historical character or talk about a historical figure of that time period, as people would have done. Like we talk about people of our time period, you know. It's not unusual for us to talk about people who are interesting to us, like the president or stars in Hollywood or other people in the community that are important. It's not unusual that we would talk about them or meet them on the street. Okay, so make sure that's going to be part of your story. Okay, so that's the basic idea. 2 to 3 days, Sunday, Monday, or Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. The minimum is 1 page per day. And at this time, I'm going to put up an example of how the format's going to look for that. So if you'll watch for a moment. Okay. If you needed more time, go on back to this and pause it. It's just a start. Obviously, I would go on then to describe the events of the day. Notice, guys, including details. What is your character feeling? What are they seeing? What are they thinking? These are all things that are part of their story for the day. And notice it's okay to use dialogue. You'll notice my character Samuel talking back and forth and talking about what he was saying with his master there. At some point I will introduce the master's name and I will have a character a little later. I'll show you how I work that in, where Samuel's going to run into a character of the time, a real person from the time. I want you to notice the format, because as you're writing your rough drafts here this week, the format's going to be important. It is a journal. And in a journal, if you notice, I laid it out. I had Samuel Dobbs, comma, then I let you know he's a slave laborer. If you're an apprentice, you're going to write apprentice. If you're a student at Dame School, you're going to write student. Or if you're a student at William and Mary, you're going to write student at William and Mary. Comma, and then for the slaves or for the tradesperson, what trade they're in. With the students, you've already said they're a student. If you want, you can put down that they're at William and Mary or whose house they're at for that third part. And then the date, I chose July 7th, 1776. If you really want to get specific, there are websites you can go on that do calendars, and you can actually pick a real day from that time. I think I missed that one by a month as I'm looking back, and you may go back and notice it's June, because I think it was June 7th was the Sunday. So, but anyways, the point is that's a format for getting you started. So we want a Sunday, a Monday, and if you want to do a third day, if you're really getting into this, or you need another day to complete your problem, I even allowed for a third day. But you have to do a minimum of 2, a maximum of 3, 1 page each. And that's a minimum. If you need more page, obviously go ahead and use it. At the end of the project, we will be writing these out by hand onto white paper, which we're then going to age, and they're going to look really cool, guys. They really are. Okay? So anyway, so this is basically how your journal can start or look. You know, you're going to start in the morning, so think about what you do in the morning. Obviously, there's things they didn't do. They didn't have toothbrushes with toothpaste, so you're not going to talk about that, but they're going to be eating breakfast. And if you really want to get specific, you could even go when we're in the lab tomorrow, or you can check this at home. They talk about different foods they had for breakfast. So, I mean, you can really get very specific in your story. See how far you can go with it. Okay? So what I've shown you so far in that example is how do I set up my journal piece? How do I set up the date? How do I set up the start of the story? And the fact that we can use dialogue in a journal, guys. The next thing is I'm going to give you an example of my character Samuel running into somebody from the time period as an example of meeting somebody or bumping into, as we said, okay? Which does need to be part of your story. And again, history.org has lots of examples of people. Thomas Jefferson's listed under the people section, etc. It's really cool. Okay, so let you look at that next. Okay, so that's a bit of a jump into my story, but again, this is just an example of a way you could have your character run into a character of the time period. You could run into Patrick Henry. I mean, like I said, if you go to the website, there's a lot of historical figures you could run into at the time. You kind of have to be aware of the time period, though. If you say it's July 4th, for example, Jefferson would have been in Philadelphia at that time. I decided to move mine further ahead, actually, and put it after the because I wanted Thomas Jefferson there, so I did it right after the Declaration was written. But it's just a way you could have your character run into them. Maybe your character's doing something in town, and notice they can have a conversation, and I kind of kept it a secret right to the end there. Who's he talking to? And through then, okay, because Thomas Jefferson was an architect besides a writer and a politician, everything else he was. So it's just another way you can roll in some extra history to your story, okay? So that's kind of our goal, just to give you an idea of some things it can look like. Remember, you do need to get your problem solved. So Samuel, for example, the next day on my third day, he's going to fix the mortar and work on getting a more solid mortar and getting this fence, or rather this brick wall that he's working on fixed on that third day, okay? So, alrighty, so this is just to help you out a little if you're looking for ideas. Remember history.org, but your history book, chapter 9, is really the best resource. I mainly want to see, can you use some of the information we've gone over into a story format? Can you use it to create your own fiction? All right? Okay, then. Well, have a good time with this as well, and we're going to see what you can come up with for your rough drafts.